Welcome to the second edition of the Okdo Academy. And together with Philip, I'm going to introduce to you today the Neopixels, and we're going to program for the microbit. Let's get Philip on the stream as well. Hi, Philip.
Hi, Richard. Hi,
How are you
everyone.
doing?
Thanks for having me. Very well, thanks. It's lovely and sunny here in Yorkshire. Freezing
Really
cold, though.
You still have snow, right?
There's snow on the ground and there's sun in the sky. Couldn't get any better.
Same here. Good. That sounds good. Hey, Philip, last week we did the first episode and we did coding with the microbit. We asked children to build an alarm. If you're there, if you're watching online, feel free to give some comments, to ask questions, or to put in some examples of what you made last week. Shall we do a short recap? And
yeah,
you?
Let me do that, Richard, because we're going to build on what we did last week. We're going to extend it, use the same sorts of concepts that we learned and build something a little bit more epic. And like you said at the end, have a look at some Neopixels, which should be fun. Yeah. So let's take a look. Let's just recap briefly then. What we did last week, we built a step counter. So we used our microbit and we used the built-in accelerometer, and using that with a bit of coding, we were able to turn our microbit into a step counter. We made a useful digital tool with it. In the process of doing that, we learned a few things. So we saw a few things, a few concepts relating to coding. And one of them is the concept of a variable. A variable was a thing in our code that could take on a different value, and we used that to count the number of steps. We're going to use variables again today. Okay. We also looked at how some elements in our code actually map into the real world. So the microbit's referred to as a physical computer, and it's a physical computer because it can interact with and monitor the outside world. And we used that in our program. So there were 3 blocks of code that we built, and each of those blocks of code maps to the real world, to things that we can do in the real world. So we used the on-start block, and the on-start block is a block of code that executes when you turn your microbit on, when you first give it power. We also used the on-shake block, and the on-shake block is a block of code that activated when we shook our microbit. And we also showed you the button press, and this was a block of code that would execute when we pushed a button. So we looked at how the outside world can impinge on and influence our microbit, and we took advantage of that in our code, and we wrote code around that, and we'll do that again today. We also looked at 2 other things that are quite important. Random numbers, which we won't use today, but are very useful. And we looked at an if statement, and we saw how we can look at, for example, a variable and see what value it is. And if it's equal to a certain number, then we performed one action. And if it was equal to a different number, we performed a different action. So that's kind of what we've learned already. And if you went through lesson 1, then that's those concepts are in your toolbox. They are concepts that you can build on and extend and use in different code bases, which is again what we do today. We looked at the microbit as well. We looked at the capabilities of it. And in the course of last week, we used the accelerometer, we used the LED screen, and we used the input buttons. So we want to extend that today. We want to go a little bit further, show you some more of the super capabilities of the new microbit. And we're going to use the microphone, and we're also going to play some sounds as well. So that's what we're going to do in our program. Should we talk about what we're going to build today, Richard? Or
yeah, but last week we had some really good ideas by using bubble wrap.
Yeah.
And to drop it out of the window, or to keep it floating in the water. Are there any suggestions from what you guys made at home? What did you do with the microbit? Did you test anything? Because I'm quite curious for that. We gave them the first ideas, and we gave them some ideas what we're going to do today. I don't know if there are any kids are in the stream, or if it's just parents or teachers, but please let us know. I know that this morning I did a training, Philip, with teachers in the Netherlands, and I told them about the lesson we were going to do this afternoon. And we used it as a starting point. We showed them how to do it, how to create it, and as soon as they knew how it worked, they were inspired to go on. So that's going to be quite interesting. But what I liked last week as well was you told a lot about the history of the microbit. Can you tell us something more about it? Do you have some more examples?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Yes, yes,
That's
please.
what
I'd
I
love
thought.
to.
Yeah.
I do actually have a few examples. Last week we looked at, we talked about the process of developing microbit. Obviously now we have the super new microbit 2, which was developed by the Microbit Foundation, Okdo, and a number of other partners. But there's a rich history leading up to that, and there's all sorts of really interesting and fun prototype boards that were developed before the microbit that we know and love came to be. We looked at these ones, the ones on screen, the Square Board 2, Blackboard, and the Hamlet. The Farnell boards. Today I want to show you a few more. I want to start with my absolute favorite one. So the one you're looking at on screen now is called the Noir board, and it's noir because it's black and white. It's very stylish. But this board achieved a number of firsts. So it's the first board that ever had the half fringe. So when you look at your microbits now, you'll see the pattern on the front, the triangles at the top. They're on one half of the microbit. But if you look back at some of the previous ones, a lot of the prototypes had a full fringe. It stretched all the way from right to left. So the Noir board was the first one that had a half fringe. And it was also the first one that actually got a name. So, you know, I talk about the Square Board 2 and the Blackboard and so on, and these were just descriptions, really. But when we developed this prototype, we decided we were going to start giving them cool and fancy names. So the Noir is the first one that had a really a name that we spent time thinking about, and I think it's a really cool name. But more importantly, only 36 of these were ever made. They're incredibly rare, and they also break quite easily for various reasons. So have a look in your collection. If you have one of these, put it away. That would be worth a bit one day. But it's very unlikely that you'll actually have any of these in your collection. So let me show you the next one. This is one of my favorites as well. This is called the Hamlet board. Yes, Richard.
Do they still work? If I would connect them at the moment, would they work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think almost all of the microbits that you've seen would work. The processor on them is the same. It's only with the microbit 2 that the processor's actually changed. And even then, you know, the Microbit Foundation were really careful to make sure it was retro compatible. But yeah, these ones in particular, the ones on board, they actually were in circulation. We built 23,000 of them.
Wow.
And the idea was to send them out to school teachers at the end of 2015 to give teachers time to experience the microbit, to work through lessons and to learn how to use it before we sent out the 1 million for school children. So this board, the Hamlet board, was built with that in mind. It was the first microbit to be mass produced, and we produced 27,000 of them. Now, there is a bit of a story there, Richard. Do you mind if I go off on a tangent for a couple of minutes and just
go ahead?
All right, sure. Well, we had to build them with some very severe time constraints, and while we were manufacturing these, we found a latent issue. Nothing too serious, but enough that we weren't happy with it. It wasn't perfect. And while these were being run off the production line, there was an emergency meeting that was called by the BBC to discuss how to address this latent issue. And we had some really, really clever engineers from ARM, from Microsoft, from the BBC, and they all sat around a table and came up with a number of options, ways that we could fix this issue. And the joke is that these were presented to the project team in a list. Option 1A was do something, option 2B was do something else, option 2A, option 2B. There were a bunch of options. And in the end, we chose option 2B. And that's where the name Hamlet came from. Obviously, the Shakespeare play To Be or Not to Be. So when we chose option 2B, we christened it the Hamlet board. Now, as I said, these are in circulation. We sent 23,000 of these out around the UK. So there's a lot of teachers or schools out there that will have access to these specific prototypes. And the way you can tell is by looking at the logo. And if you'll see on screen, compare it to the microbit that might be in your hand. The logo, the little oval with the 2 dots inside, is huge, really thick, unmistakably different from later microbits or the ones that went into full production. So have a look. If you see one of these microbits in your collection with a really thick outer line on your logo, put that one away. That one could be worth something one day. And, you know, as I said, they are in circulation. So there is a good chance you might be able to find one.
Cool. Nice story.
Thank you.
Shall we start with the lesson for today?
Shall we? Let's do that.
Let's do
shall
that.
I chat about what we're going to do today then, Richard?
Yeah, you're really good in chatting, so go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Well, we chatted briefly about it at the end of the last lesson, and we talked about how we could extend the step counter and use the same sort of technology to do something even more cool. And what we're going to do today is build a cookie jar alarm. Now, Richard, do you have a cookie jar?
Yeah, I have one.
You see, I don't have one. I'm English. We have biscuits, not cookies.
Oh, okay. Good point.
So
but it can be used for candy jar, or, you know.
We use the term biscuit tin, but for some reason cookie jar just runs off the tongue more easily. So we'll call it a cookie jar monitor. I actually don't have either of those. What I have is a jelly jar. So I keep my jellies in a jar. I do love a good jelly. So we're going to build an alarm system, so that when someone tries to access my jelly jar or your cookie jar or biscuit tin, our microbit will set off a small alarm, and it will warn us that someone is dipping into the cookie jar.
And give electric shocks as well, or not?
Well, I think at the end of the lesson, we'll put a challenge out to people to extend and come up with their own extensions. We know what you're going to do. I won't be stealing any of your cookies, that's for sure. But no. All right. So we want to do that. We want to put our microbit onto. We want to develop an alarm with our microbit that we can attach to a cookie jar, and when the cookie jar is opened, it alerts us in some way and possibly gives an electric shock to the person who's opening the cookie jar. So we're going to pretty much use a very similar code to what we did before. If you recall, with the step counter, a slight shake to the microbit set off that unshake block, and the same principle will apply to our cookie jar. We'll attach the microbit to the top, and when it opens, that motion of opening the cookie jar will set off our unshake block. And what we're going to do is we're going to build an alarm. We're going to use the built-in microphone on the microbit, so that when someone opens the cookie jar, it sets off an alarm. Now that's pretty cool, and it's quite straightforward actually. But there's a flaw. That program by itself, it's missing something.
What?
And we've had a comment. Denise, hello.
Oh,
hi. Thanks. I'm glad we amused you somehow. Yeah. All right. So think about it, Richard.
Yeah, but I wanted to say, everyone who missed last week's episode, they can still watch it on Facebook. It's still there. You can review it, and you can follow the lessons which we did last week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to put an alarm on our cookie jar. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm at that age now where I'm at risk of having to go on a diet. And what I don't want is every time I dip into my jelly jar, I don't want everyone to know I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I like to indulge in my jellies secretly and not attract an audience.
You don't set up the alarm.
I don't want to set off the alarm, exactly. So
I understand.
Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to build in a little system so that we can turn the alarm off. So we'll have our microbit, it'll be attached to our cookie jar. When someone comes up to it and opens the cookie jar, it will set off the alarm.
Mm-hmm.
But when I go to the cookie jar, I want a way to turn off the alarm. I want to be able to make it go quiet. So look, there's loads of ways we could do this, right? We looked at the capabilities of the microbit, and we saw all the different sensors on board, all the ways that the outside world can impinge on the microbit. So for example, if I wanted to, I could build a switch so that when I push a button, it turns off the alarm. Now that's fine, that's nice, that will work fine. It's a bit boring. And also there's a risk when I push the button, I might shake the microbit just a bit too much and it might set off the alarm. So maybe that's not the best option. We could, for example, use light. Now the LEDs on the microbit are light sensitive. So when you cover them up, you're able to detect that change of light from light to dark.
That's
so
handy.
we could do that. We could put our hand over the LEDs and therefore trigger the alarm to go off. Now, the danger with that is that at night, when it gets dark, our alarm will go off, and that means that our jelly jar is vulnerable. So maybe light's not the best option. Another quite a cool idea, and this will work in a load of different contexts. We have a magnetometer on the microbit which can detect magnetic fields. And what you could do, for example, is have a little device with a magnet in the end. And as you move the device close to your microbit, it will pick up the magnetic field. It'll cause changes and fluctuations in the magnetic field, which we can detect from the microbit. And therefore, we could have a secret hidden magnetic key that turns the microbit, turns the alarm off as well.
It sounds
Loads
like
of different
a spy
options.
story, something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can get really creative, and the idea of magnetic switches is super fun. We're not going to do that today, but I encourage people to have a play. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to use the sound. So we're going to use the microphone. Now, the microphone on the microbit can pick up sounds from the environment. And what we're going to do is we're going to, when we want a jelly or a cookie, we're going to go up to our cookie jar. We're going to make a loud noise. The microbit will hear the loud noise and it will turn off the alarm. And we'll turn it off for 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, just long enough so that we can dip in, grab one, satisfy our craving, and then close the jar up again and leave it secure.
So I can walk up to the cookie jar. I can talk loudly. I'm not going to take a cookie. I'm going to take a cookie for safe and then close it back up.
Yep,
sounds like a brilliant plan. Let's do it.
Well, as with last week, though, Richard, before we go and write any code, let's plan it out in our heads a little bit more. Most of the programming that we're going to do is a mental exercise. And when we type code, we want to know what it is that we're going to type before we get started. So I've got a little slide here prepared. Can you see that?
Yep.
There's two things in the environment, two things that we're going to listen out for, and we're going to react to. The first thing, as we said, we're going to wait for the microbit to be shaken, and the other thing is we're going to listen out for loud noises. So while our microbit sits there, powered up, it's active, it's listening, it's paying attention to the environment. When we detect that the microbit has been shaken, in code, we want to ask the question, is the alarm active? If the alarm is active, then we'll play the alarm sound. And if the alarm isn't active, then we'll do nothing.
Okay.
That's what happens when the microbit's shaken. We listen out for a loud noise. When we hear a loud noise, we are going to set the alarm to be inactive. And for 30 seconds or 20 seconds, however long you need, we will deactivate the alarm and it won't go off in that period. So that's basically what we're going to do. So now that we know what to do, let's head over to Make Code, shall we? Should we start building it?
Yeah, we can do that. I wonder, is everything clear for the people who are watching this? I don't see any questions, so I think everybody understands. But if not, just let us know, and then we might help. Okay, let's go to Make Code. And in Make Code, we start a new project. And let's call it My Cookie. Okay, Philip, I'm here.
Right, super. Okay, so thinking back to the design that we have in our heads, we need this concept of the alarm being on or off. The state of the alarm can change, and it will change during the execution of our code. While our microbit's turned on, sometimes the alarm will be on, sometimes the alarm will be off. To keep track of that, we need a variable. So Richard, if you could be so kind, please, as to create a variable for us and call it alarm active or something. It doesn't really matter what we call our variables as such, but it's helpful to give them meaningful descriptive names. We'll see in a little while just how useful that can actually be. So what Richard has done is created the variable, and what we want is we want it to be active by default. So most of the time we want the alarm to be on. Occasionally we'll turn it off just briefly, but by and large we want the alarm to be on. So Richard is going to initialize that variable in the on start block. That means when the microbit turns on, the code that Richard's writing for us now, that's the code that will execute. Now, last week when we looked at variables, we used numbers. We used a variable to keep track of a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You will have maybe heard about different data types in coding. And I don't want to get too bogged down with technical details like that, but a variable can keep track of numbers like we did last week, but it can also keep track of a Boolean state. And that just means the variable can be true or false. It can be 1 or 0. It can be on or off. Boolean just means there's two options, and the two options in computer terms are normally yes and no. So we're going to use a Boolean variable. Richard set it up. We've initialized it to true. And so if you just read that line of code, it actually reads like normal English. It's almost an English statement, and it says set alarm active to true. So even if you didn't know much coding at all, you could read that line of code, and because we chose our variable name quite carefully, we could actually pretty much understand what that block of code does just by reading it. Thank you, Richard. Super. Right, so let's add in the onShake block. Like we did last week, we want to respond to a shaking in the real world. And when our microbit shakes, i.e. when our jelly jar is being opened, we are going to play a noise. Now, we only want to play that noise when the variable alarm active is true. In other words, if for some reason the alarm is turned off, we don't want to play any noise at all. So Richard's just put in a nice little if block. And what he said there is, if the alarm is active, then do something. So if the alarm is active, what do we want to do? We want to play a sound. Richard, I'll hand over to you. Give us an overview of all the different sound options and what we could use here, because the microbit comes with some super options. You can do all sorts of things with sounds. So would you like to show us a few of those, please?
Yeah, I think I forgot to share the sound. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly stop share the screen, share it again, but then I'll put the sound on, so I can basically annoy everybody who's watching.
Do you know, Richard, we could have faked it and just gone beep, 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 beep ourselves.
Yeah, I could start singing. That would be a nice alarm.
No.
Now, but if you press the music button, you can choose. You can choose about creating a melody. So like here, I can press it. I can take some notes. I'm not like Mozart, but and I can create my own melody, or I can go to a gallery and I can say, you know what, Tokyo sounds good. Feels like I'm in Tokyo. But I can also play just a note, repeat it, or I can go down here. Oh, throw that one away. And I can say, let's say I take the melody da-da-da-dum and play it once. If I want to hear this one, well, I can just press shake. Sounds good. And with the microbit 2, I can even go all the way to the bottom and play a sound until done. But that would could take a long time if somebody keeps shaking it. So let's say I take one here, and I really like this one. This one takes ages to play. And the next one on the playlist, no, I'll just keep it short.
No, it's not good. Oh, please.
I'm going to use this one. This is it.
Super. All right. Well, I mean, to be... Oh, yeah.
Sorry, last one.
It's great piece of music. No, to be fair, we've actually built a working cookie jar alarm system with what you've got on screen at the moment. You could flash this code onto your microbit, you could put it on your cookie jar, and it will work fine. When someone opens the jar, it will play the sound, but it will always play the sound. So we talked about building in a lock system, or an unlock, or a block system, and we decided that we were going to use the presence of a loud noise in the environment to trigger us to turn off the alarm. So Richard, if you'd be so kind, I believe there is a block very conveniently that
Yep.
activates on loud noises. Would you be
Exactly.
so
For
kind
the
as to-
new microbit, for the microbit 2, there's a block called on loud noise. And not only loud noise, I can also go down to quiet noise. So I can choose what kind of noise I want to react on. Of course, now I want a loud noise and not just a quiet one, of course.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, what you might notice if you look at that code is that we set alarm active to true at the beginning, but at no point do we ever set it to false. In other words, there's no way so far of actually turning the alarm off, but that's what we're going to do in this on loud noise block. So Richard, if you'd be so kind, please, as to set our...
Yep, I go to the variables and I set alarm to, and I get the block. And from the logic library, I go down and I go to false, and I put it into the 0. And see the two the red dots connecting, and it goes in place.
Just like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Super. Great, great. Well, we're almost there now. We have a way of turning the alarm off, and we have code that will only play the alarm if it's turned on. So by and large, this should work. What will happen is that if you make a loud noise next to your microbit, the alarm will turn off, and then that block of code inside the on shake block, that won't run, it won't activate. So we're almost there, but there's still 1 or 2 flaws in our code. Now, normally what you would do as you build a program like this is each time you add more functionality, you would test it. Now, Richard's been showing you in the simulator, testing it in the simulator on the left. And that's a super effective way to write code. You can actually write a lot of code for microbit without even owning one. And so it's important to test as you go along and make sure each block that you add is adding some functionality, and test that when you add that block, the program still works like you want it to. It certainly does. But all right, super.
Sorry.
Thanks, Richard. He's still working. Interestingly, though, in this case, the simulator works a little bit differently to the microbit in the real world, and I'll tell you about that now, because I don't think we have time for everyone who's watching to download, take it away, test it, and then come back and report back. But before we do anything in the forever block, there is an interesting little flaw in our code. It's actually not a flaw, but it might look like one. And that is that the microbit, when it plays a sound, it plays it so loud that it actually triggers its own on loud sound block. So I've got one here. I made it earlier. It's what we're building up to, and it's currently, the alarm's turned off, and the alarm's turned off because I'm speaking loudly next to it, and so it keeps hearing me. Oh, there we go. I turned on. But what happens is when the alarm plays on the microbit itself, the microbit hears the alarm playing, executes the on loud noise code block, and turns itself off. Now that might actually sound like a bad idea, but it actually works quite well, because when someone sets off the alarm once, it will play, and it will play once, but it won't keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. So it actually turns itself off, but only after playing once, and then after 30 seconds,
the alarm is triggered. Yeah.
So it works quite nicely. However, before we try and get too clever on that, Richard, can we go back to the code base for a second?
Sure.
Thanks. I find it's very helpful to use the microbit screen. You know, it's there, it's available, and it's really easy to use. So, you know, I figure, why not? What we'll do is we'll use the screen to tell us if the alarm is turned on or off. And that way we'll know, and it'll be very helpful in testing, but also be helpful, a nice, useful little function to add. So what we're going to do, Richard, if we could, in that forever block, which you've added there, could you put another if statement in there, please?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Now, we're using an if else statement in this case. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the value of the alarm active variable. So if you'd be so kind as to make the statement say, if the alarm is active. Right, so in that case, let's show, I don't know, smiley face, bomb, alarm, show something, an icon that will tell us that the alarm is active.
Let's say we use Pac-Man.
Now that's this if statement, as I said, it says if the alarm is active, then show Pac-Man. But the block below where it says else, that's what will happen if the alarm is not active. So if the value of alarm active is false, if the alarm's turned off, let's show a different icon.
Oh, here I want to know that it's safe to get a cookie.
Got a little tick there. Super. All right, excellent. So we've got quite a lot going on in our code now. Can you test it on the simulator, Richard? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
Very much.
So at this moment, when I am quiet and I shake, now I make a loud noise. Ah, look, it's turned off.
Awesome.
Now I go back again.
Richard, can you just tell us how you managed to make a loud noise in the simulator?
I can. I will turn this down. Here you see the microphone logo, and next to it the sound meter. Everything over 128 is measured as a loud noise. So if I go with the bar up, it will show you it's a loud noise. If I go down, it won't take it now, but normally it would say it's a soft noise. But here we said, turn it off when the sound is loud. We never said to turn it back on again.
We haven't, have we?
No, we forgot.
We were building up to it.
Yeah.
It actually makes sense to build your program in logical blocks so that it's easy to test and verify. So a program like this with lots of different things going on, you would never try and write it all in one go. You would do it step by step, block by block, much easier. And if there's an issue or an error, you'll pick it up hopefully quite quickly. And like Richard said, though, our program is incomplete at the moment. There's one thing missing, and that is that apart from on start, apart from when the microbit turns on, there's nowhere in that code where we actually tell the alarm to be active again. So once we've turned it off once, we don't turn it on ever at any point. So shall we, I'll tell you what, have a look at that code and just have a really quick think. What would we do? How would you do it? And if maybe you're watching this recorded, pause the screen, pause it and have a think about how you would implement it. There's probably loads of different ways that this can be done. But what we're going to do is we're going to extend the code in the forever block. So as you can see, we've got two blocks in there in our if statement. One that executes if the alarm is turned on, and that shows the Pac-Man sign. The second one is what shows when the alarm is turned off. It's a tick. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about wanting the alarm to be turned off for a period of time, but not forever. 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something, just enough so that we can get into our cookie jar, take out our cookie, enjoy it, and then close the jar up again. So what Richard's doing now is he's bringing in a built-in function that will pause execution for as long as we tell it to. So Richard's going to change the duration on that to 5 seconds, but you could easily change it to 50 seconds. You just need to add the right number of milliseconds. 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. So Richard set it to 5 seconds. And what will happen is the tick will show for 5 seconds. The microbit will sit there doing nothing. And at the end of that period, after that 5 seconds is up, we're going to set the alarm active back to true. And that's it. That's our code base. That's exactly what we set out to design and develop at the beginning. And now it's time to test it. Now, like I said, I've got one I built here. I used an X instead of a tick, instead of Pac-Man. But because of all the talking I'm doing, it's I keep turning it off. But have a go, build it yourselves, see what you can do to improve it. But then have a think about where else a digital instrument like this could be useful, because it will be effective for you, not just on a cookie jar. You might, for example, some people might have a journal that they feel very protective over. You could attach it to the journal. It'll work on a door. If there's a door that you want to know when it gets open, maybe a bedroom door, maybe you've got a cupboard door, you could put it there. Anything where there's an accelerator. There we go, the funeral dirge. I don't know if you heard that. But anywhere where an acceleration event has meaning, where something accelerating in the real world tells us something about the real world, there's the potential for us to use a tool like this to alert us when whatever it is that happens in the real world actually happens.
And not just like this, with like when you shake the microbit, but it also works, for example, if you put it in your closet. It's dark, you open the closet, light comes in, and it triggers the alarm. So you can make a lot of different kind of alarms. And what's best, I think, is that when the alarm goes off, we've got sound, but we also need like a flashlight or something else that attracts the attention from people. That's basically the start of, well, what we're going to do next week, isn't it?
It is, but I like your point, Richard. You know, by using the light to activate it rather than acceleration, we could build a little alarm clock for ourselves. If you're the sort of person who likes to wake up as the sun rises, I'm sure it would be quite an effective alarm. There's just so many applications for the same sort of code blocks that we've used. It's just a question of applying them differently, maybe changing the on shake to a different event. But
Exactly.
the basis of what we built there is flexible, and you could do all sorts of different things using very much the same approach. But we did, didn't we? Last week we promised sound and lights.
Yeah.
And so far, I think we've ticked the box of sounds.
For sure.
But we haven't really done much with lights, have we? So
I think we're ready to go to the Neopixels.
well, do you know what, Richard? Sorry, I have to interrupt you there. Do you know that they're not Neopixels? Did you know that?
No? Tell me.
No, it's obviously in England in particular. I'm not sure if this is the same in Netherlands. We refer to vacuum cleaners sometimes as Hoovers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a generic term, but Hoover is actually a brand name. It's not a generic term for a vacuum cleaner, but everyone calls them Hoovers. And similarly, these lights that you're showing, everyone calls them Neopixels, but Neopixel is actually a brand name, a trademark owned by Adafruit. And the real name for the lights is something like, I might not have this 100% right, but it's individually addressable LEDs or something. It's a really boring rubbish name, and so
Like
it's not surprising Neopixel caught on. But I just mention that because it is a brand name, it is a mark. So in fact, when you look at, for example, your Kidtronic your Kidtronic Halo, you probably won't see the word Neopixel on it anywhere. But yeah, we'll refer to them as Neopixels. That is perfectly fine.
And the thing why I like them best is that within, again, 2 minutes, you've got a lot of success. It's quite easy to understand. And it looks like really flashy. I'll show you here that if I use the Neopixels on my desk, by just pressing one button, you get the coolest effects with lights, with rainbows going on, and a lot of stuff getting done on your desk with just some lights. You can address every single LED light separately.
Well, Richard, what you've just showed us looks highly professional. And for me as a beginner, there's no way I could do anything like that. Come on.
I'll show you. You can do it within a minute. This is so easy to do. If I go to the code, and I will add this to the stream, and I will clear my screen. And basically, if you don't have Neopixels yet, don't worry, you can all see it in the screen. Lights. So all I have to do is get extra buttons from an extra library. And if I go all the way to the bottom, to advanced and to extensions.
Do you know, Richard, sorry to interrupt you.
Again?
I think it's the first time we've actually looked at extensions, isn't it? I don't think we covered them in our last list. Shall I just make a really quick note about that? Because I think it's a really interesting point.
Sure.
I mean, we looked last week and we talked about how to power up your microbit. And we discussed how Okdo have got a fantastic range of manufacturers on board with some really, really nice extensions and things. And we, as we said, we're going to look at the Kidtronic Halo today briefly, and then in more detail next week. And then later on, we're going to look at some kit from X in a Box and look at some IoT stuff. And this is one of the strengths of the microbit ecosystem, is all the different manufacturers who are able to produce super add-ons and great things that enhance and power up the microbit. And typically the way they work is you buy a peripheral, like Richard's holding his Kitronic Halo. I have one here as well. And you add it, your microbit, you combine it somehow. We'll see how in a bit. And then what the manufacturer provides is code that you can use to make it easy to use their piece of kit. So the first thing Richard's done is he's gone into MakeCode, and because we're going to program for our Halo, he's going to import code into MakeCode that will do all the work for us and make it really easy to use the Halo zip.
Yeah.
Now we know where to find that code, because when we buy the Halo, we get a little, there's a little piece of paper that came in the packet, and that gave us a link, and it gave us information about where or how to download the or how to access the library, which Rich is about to show us.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right, thanks, Richard.
And the easiest thing is, if I want to look for it, I know that this one is by Kitronic. I can just go to Kitronic and I can find all the things they have. I know that the Kitronic Halo HD is here on top. But if I want to use Neopixels, I can use a lot of them. I can also use these ones from Groove Inventor Kit, or I can even buy them by like 5 meters long. And if I buy those, I can use the generic library, and that one is the one here on bottom, extensions, Neopixels. And just to give it a show, because this one works also in the simulator, I'll pick this one. And you will see that I will get extra blocks of the Neopixels on top. And if I go in here, they already created a variable called strip. And it says it's the strip of Neopixels connected at pin P0 with 24 LED lights. Well, if I pick it and I put it on start, it will show automatically, if you have to connect it, how to connect them. And if I change pin P0 to P1, you will see the connector will go to P1. I can even change the amount of lights. So for example, I've got 30 LED lights, I can change them into 30. Pretty straightforward. And if I recreate what I just made, I just do this one, Neopixel, show rainbow. And you will see directly, without anything connected to the computer, you will see the rainbow on the screen. Next to that, I can say forever, I want to have a loop. I want to have it rotated, just like you saw on mine. But if I put it in, you will notice that nothing will happen. That comes because we missed the command show. Here it says show rainbow, and it really showed the rainbow. Here it didn't say the word show. So if we go to Neopixel and we click on show, now we'll see that it rotates. So this is quite easy to do. And in next lesson, we will go in further on how to use the Neopixels, how to address every single Neopixel separately or combined, or just put them in a range, and what you can do with the Neopixel. And in the next show, we will also use the SIP Halo HD ring, which has 60 LED lights, but there's also a clock and there's a buzzer inside. So any idea what we can make next week, Philip? Or shall we ask the people who are watching, what shall we make next week? If we have lights, sound, clock, whatever. Sarah, do you have any idea?
Let's put it out to people to suggest stuff, and we've got a few days we can take suggestions over the coming days. I think the important thing is that left to our own devices, we'll probably end up making a clock face. So come up with something more exciting. I mean, you could probably use it for a good compass. I bet it would make a super compass. But you know, if there's anything, like you said, if there's any ideas that people have that's more creative or more interesting than that, do let us know. We'd love to utilize it.
Exactly. And you can get the Halo ring at okdo.com. They have it on stock. I just checked. So if you don't have it and you want to buy it, you can do it directly over there. Yeah, we have a lot of information about it.
I think as well, like you showed a moment ago, if people have other forms of Neopixel, it'll still be a useful lesson. I think we'll show a lot about how to use the Neopixels anyway.
Exactly.
We'll use Kidtronic's special library for the Halo because it makes it so much easier. But the principles are the same regardless of which Neopixel source that you're actually using.
Well, you can create your own traffic lights with it, for example. And in the chat, I will put in the code that we created with the cookie jar alarm. So people can copy the code, you can go in and just rebuild it or take their lessons out of it.
Do you know, Richard, I think we're reaching an end of what we needed to cover today. I think there's a risk that we'll bore people by dragging it out too long. But I think what we've done today is great. I think that for those of you who are trying to learn a bit of coding, you've seen a whole bunch of different things, different coding concepts being used. And just like a recipe, just like when you cook a meal, you can put 3 or 4 different ingredients in and come up with completely different recipes. What we've shown you over the last 2 lessons, variables, if statements, these event blocks that map to the real world, you know, all the only barrier between you doing thanks Denise, the only barrier between you sorry, I just got distracted by a comment there. But it's your imagination and the way that you can take those different components and put them together. And I'm betting there's some really creative stuff that only uses the same code blocks we've used that you can think of. So like last week, we'd love to hear anything that you're doing. If you've done something really cool, by all means, please get in touch and show us. And do you know what, Richard? I was going to one last minute just to chat before we sign off, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks very much. Because there's some amazing stuff being built with Microbit. There really is. And there's some really, really clever people out there. And I wanted to take a moment to showcase the most amazing thing I saw last week. And hopefully next week and after we'll be able to do this as a recurring theme. But I wanted to show this amazing power-up that a good friend of mine, Ivan Boschnik, he's based in Croatia, and he's responsible for working with the IRIM, who are really big with Microbit, and they've done some amazing work in Croatia to get coding into schools, STEM in general. And this crazy-looking machine that you're looking at, with a Microbit at the base, is actually a mobile phone. Ivan has built a working mobile phone that is powered by a Microbit. He's on Twitter, and he posted this on Twitter if anyone's interested. But like I said, I want to just give a shout out to some really creative uses for Microbit. So this week's Microbit Power Up Award goes to Ivan Boschnik.
Woohoo! Hey, you know, the good thing is it can only get better next time. So people can expect a lot for next time. We're going to make it interesting. We don't know what will happen, but we will for sure show some really cool stuff. Stuff that the kids made, stuff that adults made, and inspire us. Give us some comments. Ask us what you want, or tell us what you want to see next time. Come up with some ideas, and we see you again next week.
Super.
See you later.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for your time. See you then.